Hello everyone, Soul Invictus here. Today we'll be doing again an army creation guide. We'll be doing two armies, one with the Numidians and one with Galatia. The Numidian build is going to be a bit similar as far as the deployment is concerned as our build from yesterday, but we're going to add a new concept to it with lighter units on the flanks, and I'll explain a bit more as we go, as well as a Galatia, which is going to be actually a completely different army setup. Different way of deploying, etc. I will be leaving a link down below to a channel from Amilcar Barca. So he's casting some Total War Rome 2 tournament battles nowadays. So I mean, it's definitely something cool to see, and he's a guy with extended knowledge of the game. So as you watch a replay, he's gonna explain a bit what's happening. He's gonna talk in deepness about some units and all. It's very enjoyable video. So I'll be leaving a link down below. Make sure you give him likes, subscribe if you want to keep in touch with the content that he updates. So without further waiting, we will start build with Massaesyli. So Massaesyli is probably one of the top faction in Rome Total War 2. We'll be sticking to 8 sword maximum. And actually, 8 sword maximum is going to be plenty. And also we're going to add a new concept to it, which is going to be those heavy Numidian skirmisher as well as light units. It's going to be quite different from the build we had yesterday. And so with Massaesyli, for your general, I would personally always go for the Numidian skirmishers. Let's look at it. So they don't have a lot of armor, so they will be susceptible to missiles, that's for sure. But the thing is that it's a very cheap unit, so I mean, spending missiles on them is not a cost-effective trade for your opponent. So yes, you could lose your general, but honestly, very rarely do I see the Numidian skirmishers dying to missile fire. So for this specific build, we're going to start with 3 Numidian skirmishers. Then we're going to go for those epic melee units. So as you see, the Desert Cohort has 65 moral, which is absolutely amazing. And the base moral of those Desert Legionnaire is not super good, 55, but they will be paired with Shock Cavalry. And therefore, they will not be charged, and if they're not charged, normally they will fare well. We're going to bring 4 of these guys, 2 Desert Cohort. That's going to be our main sword line. Now, we have few options. So we're actually not going to go for a slinger heavy build. We'll just bring 2 slingers. For this specific build, I'm going to skip the Desert Vigiles. I mean, you could bring them if you want to have protection in front of your army. But we won't use them for this build because we want to go a bit more sword heavy. So we need those 2 extra unit slots. Then we're going to need that Shock Cavalry. These guys work end-to-end with your infantry. Once again, they lead the way, they get the charge. So you need to synchronize well with your Roman type unit there. As soon as your Numidian riders has engaged, you want to make sure that in the next 15 seconds, maximum, your Desert Legionnaires and or Desert Cohort connects with the enemy, and then you pull back your cavalry. We'll have some horse skirmishers in that build. And then we're going for 2 Numidian light infantry. And so this build is very strong. You got a lot of killing potential here with your Numidian skirmishers. These infantry units are more than potent. They will get a lot of kills if used properly. And these guys are going to be more of a flank overload type of unit. And then these tribal slingers are just there basically to bait the fires from your enemy and can be useful late game. The trick with your slingers with that build, personally, is try to snipe the general or snipe cavalry. And then you have very potent shock cavalry there. Nope. So I think we should be good to do that. Yes, indeed. So 5 coin left. Let's deploy. So we'll deploy it approximately the same way we did our Getai and Boii build yesterday. It's the same format of army. But the difference is going to be the way we want to use our flanks with that build. And you'll see those horse skirmisher are super useful. Once again, forgive the SPS drop. That computer is not made for gaming. Although, I just saw a beautiful computer at Best Buy. Probably gonna go for a gaming laptop. It's a decent price. It seems to have good specs. So we're gonna rock 2 space in between those 3 units. Then we're gonna go just one space in between each. You want to back down your elite unit a little. Keep in mind, if you wanted to just go for five legionnaire type, you could do it as well. But for this build, we're gonna go sword heavy. You have your skirmishers. Let's spike these guys up a little. So the only downside now with this type of build is that we have no meat shield. So it's going to be very important that your cavalry is used properly. Now these guys, the tribesmen, are going to go on the flank. And these guys are very light, very good charge. As you can see, 28 charge bonus. These guys were very, very, very cheap. And so if you use them properly and they get something like 70 kill, they're going to end up paying for themselves relatively well. And so as you can see, our center is a bit weak, but quite frankly, these units are still super tanky. But whatever type of unit is going to make it through, you have those heavy Numidian skirmishers to rain death upon them. Once again, your flanks are going to be reinforced by that shock cavalry, so you want to make sure that prior starting the engagement, these guys get their charge in, pull them back, so your Desert Legionnaire connect, pull them back, and then you can use these two units together. Your Numidian Light Infantry is a ground covering unit, so they're going to be super quick, so they can be very useful to go after that flank Levy Freeman or something like that, and even reinforce your cavalry against a cavalry fight, at the exception that if they get charged, they're going to absolutely melt. Now you're going to want to use your skirmishers in an aggressive manner. And the way I suggest doing that is if you deploy your skirmisher on the all-out left, which is probably the best option. Reason being is that they're going to get their shots into the unshielded side of the opponent. And you want to basically ping-pong in between the units. So you want to try to get as many kills as you can with them. And then you want to leave these units towards the back. And they're going to be a late game kind of a nuisance, really, getting after the enemy skirmishers. You do not want to lose these cavalry. They're important to your build. And so that's it. So we're going to go on this side, shoot for the right flank, and put pressure with our army on their other flank. What that's going to cause very often is that the enemy is going to square up with us, exposing their flank a bit more to our missile skirmishers. If you see that the enemy is going to push with skirmishers on the other side, I would suggest compensating by meeting him. The reason being is that you don't want your armored median to get fired on. So it's a very straightforward build, as you see. Every layer of it has to work together. So whenever you're about to engage with Desert Legionnaire, make sure your armored Numidian get the charge first. And late game, these guys, the heavy Numidian skirmishers, are going to be super useful in melee. As you can see, their stats are amazing. So once you expended all your ammunition, you can actually charge them into combat. The thing is that you don't want them to be charged. And even early game, let's say you have one unit of, let's say, Celtic Warriors or Levy Freeman, let's say, but even Celtic Warriors, even an Axe Warrior, honestly, if you blunt their charge with the cavalry, go there, click in melee mode, send them in melee, get out of here, send them in melee, pull back your cavalry, they're gonna fare just well. But before you do that, obviously you want to try to use all your ammunition. So that's gonna be today's build for Massaesyli. And once again, the build that I give you guys are not necessarily super meta. You know, we put a restriction on ourselves of 8 sword maximum. But these builds are also made to do some maneuvering. So you don't necessarily want to engage head-on your opponent. You want to try to get to him in an angle. And try to, best case scenario, try to start the fight on one flank. If your opponent squares up with you, just remember, time's on your side. You know, nothing stops you from pulling back, trying again to shoot for the flank. And when shooting for the flank with a build like that, what I would recommend doing is put your slingers in another group. What that means is that you can now maneuver your army with your slingers still firing. So let's say your slingers are getting good shots into cavalry. You don't want to lose that advantage. Put your army in front of them and continue your push on the side. So what's going to happen is probably as you square up, you're going to be able to keep on shooting at those beautiful cavalry units. Now, of course, your middle is very exposed to missiles. And so therefore, it's important that the fight happens fast on the flank. Don't force the engagement until you've done, you've allowed the Galatia or skirmishers to do their work. So just sit back, do your damage with your skirmishing cavalry, try to gain the upper hand, and then focus on the melee phase. So that's gonna be it for Massaesyli. Now we're gonna do a different build with Galatia. So Galatia is a bit less of a meta faction, obviously, and we're gonna stick with the same rule as we're going for. So that's gonna be 14 infantry maximum, 8 melee infantry maximum. I personally put myself in max 5 of the same unit. And, you know, it's just to prone diversity in our builds, really. I mean, you know, like, even with Massaesyli, I mean, we could go for a massive sword spam, but what's a pleasure in that, you know? And so we're gonna do Galatia. So this build, a lot of people won't approve of it. Personally, I love it. It's a build that's been working wonders for me. It's actually a build that I discovered from another player. It's similar to the old school Rome 2 build, so we're going to be relying heavily on our cavalry. And don't expect all of them to do well. It's normal. Sometimes the Cappadocian's going to die with 10 kills only. I mean, you don't want that happening, but that build can bounce back from that. So we're going to spam 5 Galatian Legionnaires. We're going to go for 4 Levy Freemen, 4 Slingers, and 3 of these bad boys. So the Horse Skirmisher instead of the Galatian Raiders. Then again, let's say you face a faction like, I don't know, let's say Suebi. Maybe it's in your best interest to go for the Galatian Raiders, because then you get killing potential in melee with these guys late game. But I find that if you go against a faction that has access to their own Horse Skirmisher, sometimes it's not worth it to go for the Galatian. Reason being is that, you know, once they're damaged, they're going to be less efficient at melee. As for these guys are super cheap, but you can see their missile damage is absolutely crazy. So in the initial phase where it's just throwing javelin, these guys will perform better than the Galatian Raiders. Although the Galatian Raiders late game, I mean in melee, are gonna tear shit up. They can get easily to 200 kill if you get them into enemy slingers. And if you want that, you know, that choice, perhaps you can go for one of these guys. Could we go for 2 if we wanted? I mean, you could even go for 2. But for the sake of that build, what I'm gonna do, strip these guys and spend some chevron deer on my Cappadocian. Now, you don't have to approve of that. That's the way I do it. So we're gonna have our noble horse and a Cappadocian buffed up. So 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So as you can see, that's not a meta build at all. It's just a cool build to use. Now you're gonna rely on your slingers a lot. And this build is meant to cover a lot of ground. And once again, you know, like I saw in the comment in the past video, oh, boy, I would cream that build. Well, yeah, obviously. But that is not the point, gentlemen. I've creamed Boyai with that build. I have not creamed Boyai with that build. It's probably very hard to do, but you can cream other faction like Suebi, Arverni, probably. You're going to have a tough time, obviously, against Oathsorn. If you wanted, actually after that, we're going to do another Galatian build, which I deem a bit more meta. Okie dokie, so we've got our 5 units. Now your slingers, you have 4 of them. That's why we went for expensive cavalry. These slingers are there to get kills. So it's very important that your slingers stay alive. Obviously. I'm gonna share a trick or 2 to keep these guys alive. So we're gonna spread our Levy Freeman in front of the center of each unit. And then we're gonna stack our swords in each gap. We're going to want to leave a fair amount of space in between our Galatian Legionnaires and the rest of the army. Reason being is that if they go for a YOLO charge with cavalry, you don't want your Galatian to be caught in that. So the slingers are going to take the beating. For that build, I would personally advise keeping your slingers on skirmishing mode, because sometimes it can be a lot to micro them. Noble cavalry is going to be in the center. And we've got our Cappadocian on the flank. So your first mission with that build, so as you see, it's multi-layered, you know. If you take the fight with the Levy Freeman, then reinforce it with Galatian Legionnaires. I personally try to blunt with cavalry as much as possible, but it can be very dangerous because your general is a noble horse. Let's say you were to push on the right flank. I suggest having a flank that you want to push with, mainly with that build. And if you do that, You're going to want to put your general away from where you think the action will be, only because it's a cavalry unit. So your job with that build, obviously, is going to be to damage cavalry ASAP with your horse skirmishers. If you get the chance to get the flank shot, let's say in the sword follower or an expensive unit, do it as well. And so this build is meant to be